I'm Kamla. My guest today is Robert Byrne. He is a film preservationist and board president of the San Francisco Silent Film Festival. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Second time around.
I know.
Hopefully we can talk a little bit more about silent films this time.
I suspect that will be the topic.
Okay. So you have been involved with the Silent Film Festival for a long time.
Yes, 14 years now, I think.
Okay, and this year, the 2018, is going to be what? The 23rd?
I think a 23rd festival, yes.
Okay. How did this idea for a silent film festival, how was it born?
Well, it was born, I mean, if you roll back 20 years, or certainly when I was growing up, it was very difficult to see silent films properly. You couldn't see them in a big screen. You couldn't see them with live musical accompaniment. It was just, the access wasn't there. So it was born of the idea of the two festival founders, Melissa Chittick and Stephen Salmons, to, hey, let's show people what silent film was really like. I mean, what a real performance was. People have a stereotypical idea of what silent film is like.
Which is?
Which is, it runs fast, it's Keystone Cops, it's like a honky-tonk piano, and it's...
And who are Keystone Cops?
Well, there was a comedy company, Max Sennett's company, Keystone, and there were any number of comedians that were a studio, but he had a group of cops, right? You know, that
bumbling
yeah,
cops.
Bumbling, you know, slapstick, very rough slapstick comedy. But that's what people associate today with a silent film many times. Black and white, scratchy, dirty, running too fast, not really funny, crude. And Stephen and Melissa's vision was that, I mean, this is actually a very, very important art form that has sort of been hand-waved away. So they wanted to show what silent films could really be like. So it started with one screening at the Castro Theatre.
Just one film?
Just one film. It was one film during somebody else's festival. And then from that, it turned out to be very popular, so it turned into a couple of films, and then it was a one-day festival for a number of years, then two, and then three. And this year we're expanding to 5 days for the first time.
5 days?
Yes, we're 5 days.
So you have so many films to show for 5 days?
Oh, the reason we have 5 days is because there's so much we want to show, and there's just not enough time. So, I mean, I would love to go 7. I mean, we could certainly support, I mean, the material is there. I mean, the silent film era was 30 years long, and it was a worldwide phenomenon. The majority of the films are lost, but what's left is still enormous.
So I looked up, you know, to find out how many films were produced during the silent film in the U.S. And I think this is a gentleman who wrote for one of the preservation societies. 10,919 silent films were made in the U.S.
So feature films.
Yeah. Out of which 2,749 survived. That's only 25%. 75% don't exist.
That's true. That's true.
This is just the U.S.
Right, and the numbers are probably representative worldwide, except, I mean, some countries far higher than that. I mean, the loss rate even far higher.
Why? Why did they lose them?
Well, there were, maybe the way to change that around is why weren't they saved or preserved? Well, to a certain extent, they were really considered almost a disposable medium. Meaning,
really?
Yeah, the film was made, it was shot, it circulated the cinemas, and then it was done. So nobody wanted to see them after they'd been seen. You know, there was certainly no aftermarket. There wasn't exactly home video or streaming or anything like that. So the only commercial value a film would have would be to be shown in a cinema. So you have that coupled with the fact that once sound came in the late 20s and early 30s,
talkies.
They were yes, exactly. There was really not much commercial appeal either. Nobody wanted to see those old silent films, so they were just junked. You know, they were abandoned, ignored, destroyed, whatever.
How shocked are you that they were junked? Because the silent film era was quite innovative. You know, they showed us narrative techniques. They showed us all these close-up shots, what Griffith did, W. Griffith. So they have contributed a lot to the art of filmmaking.
Right.
You know, even though there was no sound, there was no
Right.
synchronized sound. How shocked are you that they had this kind of a offhand attitude, if I could use that
Well, I
term?
mean, I'm not shocked at all. We have the same attitude today with things. I mean, we are out with the old and in with the new pretty quickly. If you think of, you know, films are the first, I tell people films are the very first software. This was the first medium that played on a device that showed things to a mass audience. And the metaphor with software is exactly the same, except it's actually a physical medium. You know, but how nostalgic are you for Windows 3.1? Or old version of websites, or, you know, things become obsolete. It was old-fashioned. It was not commercially viable. It was too early for anybody to be nostalgic about it. And they're expensive to store, and they're flammable and dangerous. So from a commercial standpoint, why would you, as a business, you know, if you're a studio, why would you spend a huge amount of money to have that stuff vaulted and protected and stored all those years?
Because our appreciation of silent film is kind of poor. Like you said, it's herky-jerky, you know, people are not talking. So we have this stereotype image of a silent film. So we don't think of it as having contributed or made innovations, right?
No, but I mean, the silent era lasted 30 years, so it was a very long time. And, you know, you went from a very brand new technology to where films were, you know, literally 10 and 20 and 30 seconds long to 7-hour epics in that cross-section.
Like Napoleon.
Like Napoleon, for instance. And, you know, just like any technology evolves over that time, you get into pretty quickly very sophisticated techniques. So any technique you see in a film today, pretty much they developed or used in the silent era. So close-ups and tracking shots and pan shots and dissolves and optical effects and, you know, special effects and animation. I mean, they did it the hard way because they couldn't do it digitally and with computers and things like that. But those techniques are there, and what they're trying to do is their color, you know, all these.
And these films were colored, like we spoke the last time around.
Right. Well, there was two. I mean, one is the films were often colored universally, like tinted by immersed and dyed. But there was also, it was during the silent era that color photography was developed. I mean, you get to the end of the silent era, you have films that have sections of Technicolor.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Like what?
Well, just last week we showed King of Kings, Cecil B. DeMille's biblical epic. And Technicolor was very expensive, but the opening sequence is in Technicolor and the closing sequence is in Technicolor.
So there are so many things we don't know about the silent film. Talk to us about D.W. Griffith. He is an important person in the silent film era.
Right. So Griffith was one of the, and they were almost, you hate to say pioneering and silent era because so many of them were great pioneers. From the American side, I think Griffith is obviously one of the most well-known directors, in the early directors. And he gets a little more credit than he deserves in cases. I mean, if you read certain places, they'll say, well, Griffith did the first close-up, and Griffith did the first this, and that's not necessarily true. But he was an immense pioneer, and what he created was this incredible body of work that are excellent films.
Like?
Well, I mean, he was. I don't know the number of films in his filmography. I would say over 500.
500?
Yeah. So I mean, in the early years, they were short films, so it'd be two-reelers, like half an hour, and they were making one a week. And then later on, of course, he get into his more epic, really epic big films, big features, Orphans of the Storm and Intolerance. And of course, the most notorious being Birth of a Nation, which is unfortunate because he
depicted things differently.
It's a horribly racist film. There's just no two ways about it. And in a sense, you just have to take it for what it is. It is a horribly racist film, period. It's a great film from a filmmaking perspective, also is a true fact. He was very proud of his Southern heritage, and his father was in the Civil War, and so he fighting for the South. So certainly he very much had a, if not his own nostalgia for the perceived grandeur of the Old South, he certainly had it sort of handed down to him.
So we also we touched upon a film called Napoleon.
Yes.
So in preparation for the interview, I went and read about Napoleon because I didn't know that this was such an important film and that you had shown it in 2012.
We did. And
I believe you were the first folks to show this film?
Well,
restored version.
Right. So it's been restored several times. And it came to the Bay Area in a truncated version in the early 80s. And but they actually had it shortened the film a little bit.
This is the 6-hour film.
Yes, they had shortened it because when they premiered that version, they wanted to show it at Radio City Music Hall. They needed to get inside union rules. So they ran it a little faster, and they actually removed one of the subplots to get it within a 5-hour window.
Okay, so what is the importance of the film and the filmmaker?
So it's a French film. The filmmaker, the director is Abel Gance, who was an incredible innovator. And he had met Griffith. He was an admirer of Griffith, for instance. But it was actually planned to be a 3-film series. He was going to do the entire life of Napoleon. And he had gone to get funders and this sort of thing, but ended up spending it all in the first film. Which now is about a 6-hour film. And he had every innovative trick and more that you can imagine. So the film is simply alive. I mean, you have split screens, you have multiple screens, you have...
Which is unusual.
So yes, that's unusual. I mean, you would get some of that, but you would always get it in a single frame. You get the cameras flying everywhere. He had cameras on horses. He would cameras on pendulums. He had you are in the action, and it is also very rapidly cut. So
he didn't belong to the school where the camera was fixed, and then the actors.
The camera is very active. The film is, you can't believe it's 6 hours long because it's so incredibly engaging. And then the grand finale in the final 15 minutes of the film, the last reel of the film, is a triptych. So it is 3 screens, 3 projectors running in synchronization, and it was CinemaScope 40 years before CinemaScope, CinemaScope was...
How did he do it?
The hard way. I mean, it was quite literally. He had you see pictures of them filming the sequences. He has a tripod and 3 cameras mounted on top of each other, like one pointing this way, one pointing this way, one pointing in the middle, filming simultaneously. But it's not just that. Sometimes it's a huge panorama.
Can you imagine how creative it must have been?
Oh, it's amazing to see. It is amazing to see. And so then...
He didn't follow any rules.
He made up the rules. He made the rules. He made the rules. So sometimes it's a panorama, and you see this amazing thing where a horse will leave, go across the stage and actually out of one camera and into the next and into the next. But
so
also,
it's like a continuing shot.
Yeah, but also sometimes it's a montage, right? You have 3 different things going on 3 different screens, and sometimes they're colored, and it's phenomenal. In 2012, we brought the Restorer Film film restorer, Kevin Brownlow, who's basically devoted his life to putting this film back together.
The British...
Yes, Oscar winner. We brought Carl Davis, who had written the score, or compiled the score.
He was still alive?
He is still alive.
Okay.
And still is.
Is he going to be here for this year's festival?
No, he still travels. He's not, I mean, he's in his 80s, but
okay.
No, he won't be coming to the festival this year. But so we had the Oakland Orchestra, so we had 55 pieces with Carl Davis conducting at the Paramount Theatre in Oakland, so 3,000 full seats. And then we had built three projecting booths in the back. So we installed three projectors.
So you could have the triptych effect.
So we could do it, and then we had constructed a special screen that went all the way wall to wall outside the proscenium arch, so it went all the way out to the edges in the Paramount. And so you're watching the film for most of the time, right, it's just in the center panel. And then when we got to the very end, to the last 15 minutes, and the masking pulled back and revealed the full screen, and all three projectors are going at the same time.
Must have been.
It was amazing. I mean, people stood and cheered. It was amazing.
Are you planning to do that again?
Oh, no.
Why? You described it in such great detail.
It was magnificent. I mean, I still have people years later stop me and say it was the most amazing.
So why don't you show it again so that those of us who missed it can come and watch it?
Well, it's a magnificently expensive proposition to put on. Insanely expensive. We had to sell out, and we did, the Paramount Theatre 4 times. So we did 4 performances over a weekend, 2 weekends, right? Because it's an all-day thing. You start at 1 in the afternoon, you have a dinner break, then you do the second part, and then so that's every day is but we had to sell out all 4 performances in order to not lose a whole lot of money, in order to just lose some money. And it wasn't about the money because we didn't, but we...
Hopefully you'll bring it back.
It is like, it's mounting a military campaign. It's all-consuming.
Now, let's switch gears. We talked about Griffith. We talked about the French filmmaker of Napoleon.
Abu Gance, yeah.
Abu Gance. What about women in silent film?
Women were very prominent in silent film, both in America and in Europe. In the early days, I hate to say early days, I mean, in the early days, like for instance, film directors, Universal, for a while, there were more female directors than male directors.
Really?
Yes. It was,
How come we don't know this? How come we don't know this?
Well, it's coming out now. There's a lot of books coming out about women in early filmmaking. There's documentaries coming out, but and it's become a very serious area of study, I would say, in the last 10 years, where people are sort of rediscovering some amazing directors.
I just discovered Anita Loos.
Anita Loos was a writer primarily, but she was...
And she worked with Griffith.
She worked with everybody. She was, she had an exceptionally long career, and is quite a character. There's a great biography of hers.
But why is it that we associate her with Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which is a 1960 book, I want to say, and a film? I think it had Marilyn Monroe, right? That was my only association with Anita Loos. I didn't know that she'd worked in the silent film. Why is that? Why is that gap in our minds about women in the silent film?
Well, I think, well, first of all, if anybody thinks of the silent film era at all, right, I think it's the same thing. I think you have certain names, and I think for a long time, even if you went to film classes or intro to film classes or something like, you got the big directors, so you'd get the big male directors for that matter. So you'd get Griffith, you'd get Sergei Eisenstein, you might get Abu Gance, but he's French, so maybe not. You'd get some of the big name male directors, Cecil B. DeMille, you'd get those sort of things.
Would you get Ozu?
Probably not, because I don't think people think of him as, he started in the silent era, and his silent era films are amazing. They're just gorgeous. But I think people more associate him because he also went into the sound era. I think a lot of times when people think of also silent era directors, they think of people that really worked in the silent era. I think Griffith made one talkie. Eisenstein made a couple of talkies. But for most of them, there's almost a break. So if you know a director that bridged both eras, you think of them as sound films. You think of Ozu in his sound films, right? Even though he started in the silent era. So I think that maybe some of those bridging, it becomes one of those, or some stars also. Like you don't think of Gary Cooper as being in silent films, do you?
Oh, was he?
Yeah. So he got to start in the silent era. Joan Crawford, with a huge silent career.
Even Joan Crawford?
Yeah. Yeah, so you don't even, because you think of her sound films, you don't even think of her as a silent film actor, as opposed to people that were primarily in the silent era. You sort of put them in one category and put the sound people in another category.
Gloria Swanson?
Gloria Swanson had a huge career spanning both.
What was that famous line of hers in Sunset Boulevard?
Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up now. The closing line of the whole film.
Didn't she also say about silent films, they had faces, not voices or something?
Yeah, they had.
We had faces.
There's a couple of, we had faces then. What the movies, people didn't get smaller, but the picture did, or something.
Yeah, the pictures got smaller. Yeah.
She's making a dig at television,
there are some brilliant lines in that film.
Yeah.
You know. But when we talk about women, we in silent film, Mary Pickford comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Why is that?
Well, Pickford, I mean, you can pick a category where she was a pioneer. I mean, she started very early. She was a stage actress.
She was Canadian.
She was Canadian from Toronto, and they're very proud of that there. You know, but she was a stage actress for years. Very young years. So was her sister and her brother, all were on the stage. And she came first to film to make some extra money. You know, in the very early days, film acting was not, it was sort of a second-rate thing. I mean, you wouldn't want to jeopardize your reputation as a good stage actor by being in films also. That's definitely taking a step backwards. So she did it on the side, but she went to Griffith. She started doing 2 reel films with Griffith at Biograph in New York, and was quickly a hit, and people wanted to know who Little Mary was. So, you know, she went on to make, so there's one that's almost all, there's a silent era actress. So she pretty well ended with the sound, you know, with the coming of sound. She made 1 sound film, but she has almost 300 films to her credit that she was in.
300 silent films.
Yeah.
And many have survived.
A great deal of them.
Because she took care to preserve them.
She did. Well, I mean, she was a very powerful woman. So she had her acting career. So, but she was also a very shrewd business person. So she was an executive also. She had great control over her films. And, you know, ultimately it was her and Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith and Douglas Fairbanks that formed United Artists. And she, you know, she was a force in the industry for decades.
So Mary Pickford is one of the more interesting actors from that era.
Absolutely.
Now, let's switch gear to the 23rd Silent Film Festival, which is from May 30th to June 3rd.
Right.
And the person here is?
Greta Garbo.
The Swedish actress.
Yes.
So you have a film, you're honoring her?
Yes, we're showing her first film, the first film in which she starred in, the saga of Gösta Garling. It's been newly restored.
Is it Swedish or German?
Swedish. It's a Swedish film.
Okay.
Of course, it has English titles, so
right.
You're not required to read Swedish to watch the film.
Right.
And it's an amazing, epic film. We will have, you know, accompanied with an orchestra, and it's going to be amazing.
Okay. And then you also have Billy Wilder's first film, which he wrote.
Well, that's an interesting film. So People on Sunday is sort of a slice of life film. I'm not even sure that film was actually written. It sort of captures a day. So it was
in Berlin.
In Berlin, and so you have Billy Wilder and a number of the very young Billy Wilder, obviously, and a number of other of the young filmmaking rising talents there in Berlin collaborated to make this film.
And because one of the things that you do is you have something called Amazing Tales from the Archives, where you talk about how these films were restored.
Right.
And this year, I believe you have 10 films that were restored that you're premiering?
There are, I think so, yes.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Well, we've become, there are a number of silent film festivals around the world that's really sort of grown out a lot. We're one of the very first. And certainly in the United States, I think the biggest and most prestigious. So we are now in the fortunate position of when an archive, for instance, does a new restoration, they really want to premiere it in San Francisco. So we're sort of in the position to where when they want to bring it out to the world, we're one of the venues that they really want it to come to.
So 23 odd years ago, you started with one film, and today you've become the venue for premiering these restored films.
That's true, and restoring on our own, too.
Okay,
so.
and then the best thing about this film festival is you actually have live orchestra, which is what the old days, the silent films
Absolutely, that's a very key thing. I mean, it's a live performance. We have a variety, we'll have over 50 different musicians coming from, we have different ensembles, soloists, et cetera. So depending on the film, you know, we match up the music with the film itself. And it's one important thing to come in mind. So we call it live cinema. I mean, it is a live performance. So each performance is unique and special.
Wow. Now, I'm going to switch gears and ask you some 3 fun questions from the Proust questionnaire. What is your most treasured possession?
Film-wise or just anything?
Anything.
Gosh, I don't know. My most treasured possession. We'll come back to that one. I got to think about that one.
I was going to say maybe your computers and your discs. Because
I know, but that's so shallow. My new laptop? No.
Because that's where you do your work.
That's what I'm spending all my time on. You say, what position do I spend most of my time with? It is definitely my film restoration work.
I would think that's your most treasured possession.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, oh, my wife.
You can still say that. What is your greatest extravagance?
I think the same thing. I think I have my fascination with the silent era has me spending way too much time on eBay sometimes, finding artifacts from the silent era that, like, oh, I really need that.
Okay, and what is your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness? Oh, gosh. These are very metaphysical questions here. Perfect, I don't know, those last 15 minutes of Napoleon were pretty amazing.
There you go. So it's all related to films.
In this context, I think certainly so.
Rob, thank you so much. And just to recap, the 23rd San Francisco Silent Film Festival is from May 30th to June 3rd.
Yes.
2018, and it's at the historic Castro Theatre.
Castro Theatre in San Francisco.
Okay, and if there's one film that somebody should watch, what would you recommend? I know it's a hard question, but sometimes people don't have time. It's just one film they need to watch.
Well, you do remember I said everything is special. So,
right.
And they're all different and unique. One thing, gosh, that is the hardest question you've asked me. That's more than my most treasured thing. I would say, if you want to be surprised, come to the Ozu film.
Ozu film. For some reason, I thought you were going to say Ozu.
It's just a beautiful, magical film. You can't go wrong with it.
Rob, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure being here.
Thank you for stopping by.
Thanks.
We wish you the best for your film festival.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Join us next week for another new conversation. If you missed any of our shows, you can watch them on our YouTube channel. And as always, thank you.